Good morning. Today we will continue the part 3 of our lesson Trigonometric Identities. Now I will teach you how can I simplify an expression. Now before I tell you how can I simplify, we want to see now what is the difference of verifying and simplifying the expressions. In the previous period we know how can we verify. Today, I will teach you how can we simplify. What is the difference between them? Verifying that I give you an expression, you have to transform this expression into specified equivalent one, to specified one. But simplifying, you have to transform this expression to unspecified equivalent one. Student A can simplify it as cosecant, and student B can simplify it as 1 over sine. It can be. Now, here, what is simplified trigonometric expression for cosecant tan? Here I give you cosecant and tan. We want to see what is the simplified trigonometric expression for it. Now, cosecant tan. What is the cosecant? Cosecant, it is 1 over sine times. What is tan? It is sine over cosine. Now, then after that, sine cancels sine, so it will be 1 over cosine theta. 1 over cosine theta is what? Secant theta. So the simplest expression for cosecant times tan is secant theta. The second one now here. Simplify this trigonometric function. Sine squared plus cosine squared plus tan squared of theta. Can you simplify it? If you look at sine plus cosine squared plus cosine squared, and using the Pythagorean theorem, is equal 1? Yes. Why? Since sine squared of theta plus cosine squared of theta equal 1. Now 1 plus tan squared of theta. Also, there's another Pythagorean that say that 1 plus tan squared of theta is secant squared of theta. So 1 plus tan squared of theta is secant squared of theta. Now, cosecant theta minus cosine times cotan, we want to simplify this expression. Now, cosecant is what? Is 1 over C, so 1 over sin theta, minus cosine, keep it as cosine. Sometimes the sine and cosine is the simplest form. Times cotan. Cotan, it is cosine of theta over sine theta. Then 1 over sine theta minus cosine times cosine is cosine squared of theta over sine theta. After simplifying them, it will be 1 over cosine squared of theta over sine theta. Now, using the Pythagorean theorem, 1 minus cosine squared of theta is sine squared of theta over sine theta, which is cancel each other, so it will be sine theta. So the simplest form is cosecant theta minus cosine times cos. Now, tan theta over secant minus cosine. How can I simplify this expression now? Now, tan is sine over cosine of theta. This is what tan over. Secant is 1 over cosine minus cosine. Then, by finding the like denominators, so it will be sine theta over cosine theta over 1 minus cosine squared of theta over cosine theta. Then, can I cancel cosine with cosine? Yes. So it will be sine theta over 1 minus cosine squared is what? Is sine squared. After simplifying, so it will be 1 over sine theta. And 1 over sine theta is cosecant theta. So the simplest form of tan over secant minus cosine is cosecant theta. Now, number 61, cotangent squared minus cosecant squared over tan squared minus secant squared is what? Now, cotangent and cosecant, there's a relationship between them. If you remember the Pythagorean theorem that said that 1 plus cotangent squared of theta is equal to what? Cosecant squared of theta. So, cosecant squared minus cotangent squared is equal 1. So, cotangent squared minus cosecant squared is equal -1. So, it will be -1 over the same 1 plus, there's also a relation between tan squared and secant squared. We know that secant squared of theta minus tan squared of theta equal 1. So tan squared of theta minus secant squared of theta equal -1. So it will be -1 over -1, which is 1. This is the simplest expression for cotangent squared minus cosecant squared over tan squared minus secant squared. Now number 62 here. 1 minus sine theta times 1 plus sine theta times cosine squared theta plus 1. Now, before I'm talking about sine and cosine. If you multiply a minus b times a plus b, what you will get? You will get a squared minus b squared. Okay. If you multiply 1 minus x times 1 plus x, what you will get? 1 minus x squared. Here is the sum. 1 minus sine theta times 1 plus sine theta is 1 minus sine squared of theta times cosecant squared theta plus 1. Then 1 minus sine squared, it is cosine squared using the Pythagorean theorem times cosecant squared of theta plus 1. Now cosine squared, keep it as cosine squared. Cosecant, it is 1 over sine squared plus 1. Then cosine times over sine is what? Cosine. So cosine squared of theta plus 1. Then cosine squared plus 1 or 1 plus cosine squared is equal to cosecant squared theta. So this is a simplest form of the previous expression. Here now, you have now cosecant squared times 1 minus cosine squared. Now, 1 minus cosine squared is what? It is sine squared times cosecant squared. Now, cosecant it is 1 over sine squared of theta times sine squared of theta. Cancel each other, so it is equal 1. Now, I will remind you how can I verify the trigonometric identity. Here, I choose one or two examples to see how can I verify. Number 50 in your book. 1 minus sine over cosine. I want to prove that it is cosine over 1 plus sine. How? If you multiply the first term by cosine theta over cosine theta, it will be what? It will be cosine theta times 1 minus sine theta over cosine theta squared. Now, then, cosine theta times 1 minus sine theta. Now, if you are going to their Pythagorean theorem, cosine squared of theta, it is 1 minus sine squared of theta. So down, this cosine squared, I write as 1 minus sine squared of theta. Then, now, before a few minutes, I told you that 1 minus x times 1 plus x is 1 minus x squared. So 1 minus x squared, okay, it will be 1 minus x times 1 plus x. So here I have 1 minus x, and here I have 1 minus x squared. So 1 minus x squared over 1 minus x is 1 plus x. So these two ones, I can simplify it as 1 minus sine squared. I mean, it would be 1 minus sine times 1 plus sine theta. Okay, which is completing the square. So then 1 minus sine cancel 1 minus sine. So I have only 1 plus sine. So cosine theta over 1 plus sine theta, which is what I want to prove. Here now, cosine theta, I want to prove that it is cosecant times cosine. What is cotangent? It is 1 over tan. Okay. But it cannot help me. Does it cosine over sine? Yes. It is cosine of theta over sine theta. Now, I want to prove that it is cosine. Okay. Cosine is done. Cosecant. How? I know that 1 over sine, I can rewrite this one as 1 over sine theta times cosine theta. Is it right? Yes. Then cosine theta keep it as cosine theta. Then 1 over sine is cosecant theta. So I prove my expression.